us on. All right, we're behind the curtain.
Oh yeah. Let me get on the
Which
mm.
All right, tell me when you're on the Twitch.
I am ready to go.
All right, so we're going to go transition. We're live. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about Valheim. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we forget to close the window and the big giant truck rolls by in 1 second. I guess actually I'm on my wireless headset, so you can hear me just fine. And I can say that on this podcast we talk about games. The biggest kind of sensation game it feels like that's happening right now is Valheim, which is an indie survival game that entered early access a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and has kind of taken off over the course of those 2 or 3 weeks, mostly as far as I can tell by word of mouth, right? It seems like a lot of folks are getting in because friends. That's how I heard about it, right? Like I had friends who said, "Oh, have you tried Valheim? Do you want to? You like we should play Valheim," and that's exactly kind of what we did. Um, does that match with your understanding of kind of the?
So I had heard like internet buzz, like I follow like I think it's like MMO Byte news I follow for like MMORPG news, and he was talking about it, and then friend of the cast Monik was like, I heard about this Valheim game, and then we didn't never played it together, but I had heard about it there, and then because of the general internet buzz I saw it, and Castle Super Beast, which is a podcast I like to listen to, talked about it at one point as well. So all those kinds of things. One of these kind of like internet milieu games, like what was another good example of one of those like that everybody kind of jumps on for a while, like Rust maybe.
Actually, yeah, I mean, does that count as? It's not in the same genre, but like Among Us or Fall Guys.
Right. But like Among Us, I think is a good example as well. Yeah, you're right. It's not the same genre, but it's the same kind of internet media. I think Fall Guys had like a little bit of like a real push from like real marketing, right? Because like
that's true.
It showed up at like a bunch of different trade shows, whereas Among Us was like a 3-year-old game. So you know, but yes, the internet basically launched into popularity from nowhere. But it is a survival game in kind of the Minecraft vein, right? Like maybe a little bit more like Rust. But it seems to have like grabbed some people and really like, you know, people are saying it's something special. Minecraft is in itself a phenomenon, and maybe we can explore a little bit about like kind of like the whole survival creation genre. But people who don't like Minecraft seem to be gravitating to Valheim in a way, specifically because I think some of the more realistic elements. Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I definitely do, and I think that part of it, it sounds like like Rust is similar, because like Rust is also is like more realistic, and there was like a Rust Twitch streamer server for a while. I vaguely remember that being a thing. I think Offline TV was doing it, who are like the big Among Us guys. It is not Monday. This is Sunday. We're streaming on Sunday.
Yeah,
Everybody say hello to our good friend Phelan in the chat. And so I think Valheim did get a push for that reason. It also just like has a more robust kind of combat structure and crafting structure compared to Minecraft. I think part of it is that if I'm a kid, right? Let's say I was 5 when Minecraft came out. I was playing Minecraft on, whatever, my dad's iPad. I'm now 15, right? And that seems like a pretty natural progression up. In the same way that, right, like, maybe if you're somebody who played EverQuest, you progress up into WoW or something like that, right? Like, or if you played Halo, you progress up into Call of Duty, sort of thing. Like, it is sort of the next generation in a well-worn genre. Like, honestly, I think maybe a piece of this is just like the complexity of the building mechanics. are, like having to worry about structural stability as you are like crafting a house compared to, Minecraft. You can just put whatever you want up, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no nothing will ever fall and break and crash to the ground or whatever. Like that might be enough to kind of like attract people in those ways.
Yeah, have there really not been any other games that have really grabbed on that? Because like it might be the case, right? Like I can't think
I
of.
do think that there have been. Ark is a good example of this.
Right. Okay.
Um, I've played a couple of these, but none of them have ever grabbed me in the same way that Valheim grabbed me.
Right. And do you have a good sense of why that is? Like the other ones
Um,
have had like objectives because I know part of the thing here is you jump in and it's like you have to go kill these things, work on it, right? Like and you have all the time in the world to build towards it, but you do at least immediately have a goal. Whereas like you have sort of kind of goals in Minecraft, right? But like they're not super explicit. Or at least when I was playing, they weren't. Just kind of like you could go find the Ender Dragon, I
there is
guess.
yeah there is the clear explicit win state of the Ender Dragon, but I think in general Minecraft is just expressive, right? Really, at
Right.
the end of the day, all Minecraft like the goal of Minecraft is expressive. There's a bit of like I guess I would call sort of a progression goal to it. In the same way that like Factorio is probably the easiest answer of this, where it's just like you do the thing so that you can do the thing better, right?
Right.
You are progressing through sort of the tree that they have laid out, and in Minecraft that goes right. You start with wood, then you go to stone, then you go to iron, then you go to diamond, right? And you are going further and further and unlocking more and more systems kind of over time, right? Like at the beginning, it's just mining and cutting down trees, right? But eventually you're dealing with experience and you're enchanting your items and you have alchemy, you're popping potions, you're shearing sheep for wool and all these other sorts of right, like all these other sorts of extra systems. I do think that it creates its own goal, right? You want to see what's next. And
Right.
that's
Right.
very much in Valheim, right? That's like, oh, I beat the first boss. I now have a pickaxe. I'm going to go see what I can mine. I can mine copper and I can mine tin and I can make bronze. Now I'm in the Bronze Age, right? And we're going to progress through the Bronze Age tree. And then, oh, well, now we're going into swamps and we're progressing iron. And that is its own sort of goal making and reward.
Does the game call them ages like that? So just so everybody at home knows, I literally maybe 40 minutes ago beat the first boss and just kind of like dealt with the fallout of that. And by the fallout, I mean just kind of like the direct consequences of that, which is apparently things will attack my house. So I built a palisade around it, and then I logged off to jump on this with you. So. But so like when you like does like is that Bronze Age moniker? Is that a
That's just what we've been calling
okay?
it. Because we have friends that are on different like level. So for the way that I've been playing Valheim is me and a couple of like our WoW guild got together and just like on a Friday night, right? Like last Friday night. And we just like played all night basically. Um but we have other friends who were playing who had picked up the game before we did, and so like they were further ahead. And when we got pretty solidly into the Bronze Age, they got solidly into the Iron Age, and I don't know how, but we just call them ages at this point,
Yeah, that makes
right?
sense, right? Like,
Mhm.
I like the connotation. Is there like a lot of like so there's it seems to me that there's like a level of like complexity constraining, right? Like you can't build as big and kind of impressive structures in the lesser ages, which makes sense, right? Like it's kind of like in the same way, kind of like imitating human progress, probably by design, which I think is clever. Um, but like, how quickly do you like you've talked about like building long ships, right, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Um, like how like part of the I think maybe I think maybe it's part of the appeal is that like things take a lot more effort than they do in Minecraft, right? Like like a tree in Minecraft is like a tree's worth of wood, and like you could just like build a box house out of it, right? Like and pretty much one to one. Whereas in Valheim, it takes a while to like gather enough wood to make a
That
house.
might honestly be a piece of it. And if I tweeted the other day, I said, like I don't know what is different about Valheim, right? Like I've done a million of these survival games. I've played some of these survival games I've played survival games that other people haven't even seen, for like for my job, right? And I feel like I have a good understanding of these mechanics, and I can pretty clearly articulate what makes them successful, what makes them not successful, right? What are the things that people will look forward to and like engage in? What are the things that people will just kind of ignore and not worry about? And one of the things about Valheim is that it might be the most effort game that I have seen because the encumbrance rule is so low, right? Like the amount that you can carry is so low. And maybe it is honestly just that specific rule because it creates this desire to have additional means to transport things, right? And also this desire to like go out on sort of like expeditions, which feels good, right? This is something that I did a lot. I made a whole set of bronze armor. I upgraded all my bronze armor, right? That costs like 100 bronze bars, which is 200 copper, and 100 tin. In another game, those numbers are incredibly easy to come by, right? If I'm in Minecraft and I walk in with an empty, in Minecraft, I would take 4 iron picks and I could fill up my whole inventory with stone, with stacks of iron, with stacks of coal, with stacks of redstone, right? Like all of this. Um, and so I would like kind of walk away. I would like walk away with this huge full inventory. But like just going to a copper node and mining for a couple of minutes, that'll fill up your inventory. And your weapons and your pickaxe will degrade. So now you also have to go back to repair your pickaxe. And then that creates this sort of desire to be like, okay, well, if I'm really going to go far afield, maybe I'll make a temporary stopgap house, right? That has a forge that I can re- you know repair my pickaxe at. Um, and I think that basic construction is maybe the secret sauce
Yeah,
to why Valheim is more successful.
and not only that, but like the like even creating that stopgap like area, right, is non-trivial, right? Like I remember, like I was like, how do I repair my axe? And I so one thing on top of this is I have had to Google very little in order to make the game work, right? Like I was thinking about this, like part of the thing with Minecraft is like that, like kind of like arrange things, build interface, like the 3x3 grid is kind of clever, but like it's not super compelling to like go and like iterate over things. You go and you Google what the recipes are and you put them out. And I think they may have even kind of changed. I haven't played Minecraft in a while, so
To
they
be
might.
fair, yeah, there is now a recipe book in game,
Okay.
but sure, when we played, and for the bulk of its probably pre Microsoft development, it did not have that. You had to Google it basically. I've also, by the way, not Googled any of this game. Including everything that we have found by way of discovery, such that I actually made a friend of ours mad because she had been playing the game for about 2 weeks. Like she really got on early and saw us all playing, and she was like, oh, I can like bring you guys some like bronze tools. And we were like, no, 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 we want to figure this out for ourselves, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And we've more or less held true to that, including things that like we can't even explain. We learning that stuff slowly over time has been a big piece of the fun compared to looking it up online.
Yeah, no, like I felt very clever when I figured out. It's like I'm like looking at like the cooking station, right? I'm like, I bet you this has to go over a fire. I put it over the fire. I'm like, I'm smart. I'm like the smartest person alive, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm like a Viking Einstein, right? So but like, just to kind of wind back, like one of the very few things I have Googled is like is how to repair the starting axe, because that's not immediately obvious, right? Because like you look at the
sure.
workbench and it doesn't give you a lot of context for it. It's like, and the fact that you have to build a roof over the workbench in order to use kind of some of the this the functions of it, right? Like it's apparent, like it's effectively there's like a level 0 workbench and a level 1 workbench with the roof over it. Um, and I thought that was like a super kind of clever way to make it so that you can't just kind of like Minecraft, like maybe if you're being like really really fancy, you bring a workbench with you, right? But that's like still like a single block gets placed down, right? And it's spawnable out of base materials because it has to be. But like the workbench, like everything requires just enough effort that you have to kind of think about what you're doing, which I
I
find
think it's
super.
to prevent combat building. We talked about this a little
Yeah,
bit. where like if you know, having a workbench necessary to build stuff around, right? Like you can't just build a wall in the middle of the forest. So if a troll sees you, you can't go bop bop and like make a wall so that it hits the wall instead of hitting you. You know, you actually have
You're
to
right.
have a workbench. I also sort of think that the clunkiness almost of the building interface is kind of a feature in that sense, which is like, even if you know, like maybe there would be like a high end, imagine like a Valheim with high end Fortnite players. I'm sure these guys could just place a workbench and then do whatever. But like, because of the stability, like the need to create stability and like the inaccessibility of those menus, doing that kind of thing in combat is like very prohibitively hard. I'm sure high level players could do it, but like any low level player like you and I, it would never make sense to do something kind of along those lines. Which is, you know, neat. I
Yeah,
think that's cool.
and I think that like it's also part of the draw in a way that like, you know, if something's easy to do, it's not as impressive. That makes
Hmm.
sense, right? So like having a well constructed house in Valheim is inherently going to be more impressive than even a large house in Minecraft, because you don't have to like worry about, like, you know, that's all kind of like, you know, aesthetic. Like maybe there's some impressiveness in like the detail that you put into the building in Minecraft, but like doing it so that it's stable is an impressive feat in Valheim, and it kind of like plays off of what I call values, I guess, in a weird way that way, right? Like if you have a very nice house in Valheim, then you know you've put the work in, and that's um it's actually kind of interesting too, like, right, like uh you know getting value out of like out of building something in game, right? Like that's like, you know, ultimately it's a thing that's like not super worth it in like your real life, but it's like a thing that gives you that same feeling of accomplishment. I think that's interesting, right? It's almost like
Yeah, and it gives you a goal to work towards, right? You know,
right,
one of the things that I had was I kind of set that we like set down roots at a like a little inlet, like a little bay. And I was like, this is where I'm going to build my first like real building, right? And I put a lot of time and effort into, we call it the compound, right? Into the compound. And now it's like done. And that like that is a feeling of accomplishment that is entirely emergent, right? Like I, the game didn't ask me to build a compound. I just wanted to kind of set my own base of operations and build my own, you know, structure. And it took a while. It took me about 2 days to actually put the whole thing, you know, like the whole thing together, kind of end over end. Um, but it is much different compared to, you know, I don't know, World of Warcraft, right? League of Legends, where like the goals are incredibly straightforward and specific, right? Gain, you know, get to gold, and you'll get a skin at the end of season, right?
yeah,
Get timed 15s in every dungeon, and you get a mount at the end of the season, right? Like those are incredibly explicit goals that are very, you know, worth it, right? Like, I mean, obviously I've been going insanely hard for Keystone Master, and I am absolutely just as motivated to go after Keystone Master in the same way that I went after my house. But one of those was kind of like an internalized, god damn it, the camera did that thing again. One of those was kind of like an internalized goal, whereas the other one is like a goal that is set by the game and its designers.
yeah, no, absolutely, but like it has to still have to be it has to be an intentional part of the setup, right? Like, you know, like the draw of this game was always going to be the building stuff, right?
Yeah, man, I don't know what happened to my camera. I'm really sorry, you guys. Nobody get mad at me. It just like flipped out. Yeah, that is definitely true. And I think people gravitate towards that kind of expressiveness in the same way that
Yeah,
people
yeah,
gravitate towards Legos, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but
Um,
now you have tools to be, you know, like that much more. I think part of it is also just the aesthetic of Valheim is specific in a way that it isn't really in other games like Minecraft or Rust. Like Minecraft kind of creates its own aesthetic sort of with the voxels, but like the specific Norse theming of it and like your ability to create like Norse direction like decorations, like mounting your trophies or you know, adding like a wooden dragon's head to your longhouse, that kind of stuff. I feel like that is really valuable.
Vikings are so hot right now.
Yeah.
Is basically what. But I think you're also right in that like beyond kind of like the explicit theming, right? Like it's got this very kind of like low resolution art style, but like very pretty effects applied on top of it, right?
Hmm.
Like like right as I was about to end, I looked up and I saw like the freaking the light the world tree Yggdrasil, like the branches extending out. I was like, holy shit! I never noticed that. Like that's really pretty. I'm like, it's got like
Yeah,
really
and it
nice
has
depth of field and very good
it,
water
it
effects. Yeah,
yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. It has amazing lighting effects and amazing water effects that are like applied to these super bloxy pixelated textures, right? But I think I don't hate the textures, and I think that that probably all works in the sort of aesthetic of the world, in sort of the same way that like the blocky polygons of like WoW are dated compared to like Final Fantasy 14 or whatever. But it like works. It's like internal to that aesthetic, and that's fine. I think it's the same sort of thing with Valheim, and that maybe like I don't know, maybe. First of all, the game is only like half a gig, which is nuts to me.
yeah,
Um, and maybe that's the secret sauce, right? They have like incredibly powerful and interesting like lighting engines, but the textures that they're doing are obviously insanely basic.
yeah. No, no, absolutely. Like, yeah, that is super interesting. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see like what the tech is behind that. I also wonder like how much of that is like their intended end state because this is an early access game.
Yeah.
Did you ever play Nidhogg? Like
Yeah.
the fighting game, or like it's kind of like a
hmm
fencing
It's
game.
that fencing game. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Have you ever played Nidhogg 2?
Mm-mm.
For everyone at home, I'm gonna tell you. Let me see if I can find it real quick and maybe pull it up on screen. But like the art style between Nidhogg 1 and Nidhogg 2 are so different. Um, uh, that like Nidhogg 1 is like it's like pixel art and it's like very stylized, and Nidhogg 2 is like super cartoony looking. In a way that um that like really threw me off when I first saw it. I was like, wait, this is what it was supposed to look like almost, right? Like let me see if I can pull this up on the stream real quick. Yeah, I might not be able to, so bear with me, friendos. Maybe this is not going to work. You but you see what you see what I mean?
hmm
Uh so I wonder how much of this is intended, if that makes sense. Like how much the like how much if they could do whatever they wanted to do, if it would look like this or not. Real quick. Sorry guys, not playing super nice. We're gonna do this real quick to transition over here. No, the freaking stream boxes are covering the images. But yeah, um, the like I've got it up on the stream real quick. You can see that these two visual styles are extremely different. I wonder if given time, if Nidha or Valheim rather is going to move in that direction at all, if that makes sense, right? If like they're gonna make it look different, and how much that's gonna screw with their ability to or screw with their popularity, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I remember at the beginning there was talk for Minecraft of eventually implementing physics so that things fell, right, like so things didn't, the floating stuff didn't work anymore. Obviously that would be like so anathema to what Minecraft has grown into that they never pursued that. um and I can't help but wonder if this was the plan all along. I wonder if they regretted all like launching it in this way, and it's like, well, maybe we can't increase the textures anymore because everybody's gonna hate us for abandoning the thing that kind of like defined it, that defines the kind of like look and feel of the game. Does that make any
I
sense?
do wonder what that is going to be like, because my general sense in early access was they were going to be adding things like features, right? That they were going to be doing gameplay stuff. That they were going to add,
Sure.
I don't know, new materials to farm, new biomes, right? New whatever their server infrastructure. You can have 20 players now. You can do different stuff with those kinds of players. This is the kind of stuff that it always feels like people gravitate to early access because they want to see the expansions of those kinds of systems, right? But it is possible that they do get kind of more advanced art over time, especially because they've been so successful, right? Like one of the biggest bottlenecks in games is art, and people don't think about this at all, right? The wall in many scenarios between a good thing happening, right, that you want to happen, and that thing making it into the game is a lot of the times art. Because it's just like, oh, it would be cool if this new enemy was in the game, but that requires rigging, that requires animation, that requires a 3D model, texturing, all this other sort of stuff, right? That's like really, really technically complicated and kind of hard to hard to do and hard to implement. Um, and so maybe they are in a position where they kind of compromised on that a little bit for Valheim's early access, but we'll be playing Valheim in 3 years and it'll have very advanced, you know, high quality textures or something kind of like that.
Yeah, yeah. I have. I wonder. So I'm looking at the early access page, and it says they're about 70% complete content wise, and or that feature wise 75% complete, and content wise is about 50% complete. So maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree with the graphics thing. It like I said, it's super impressive how like this engine looks. Like it looks so pretty for such a basic shapes and shaders.
Hmm.
It's really a testament to what you can do with kind of like that level of stuff. Uh, yeah, but yeah, it's a funny, just kind of a funny aside. In terms of like that graphics resource development stuff, did you ever play Heroes of New Earth back in the day?
I played a tiny bit with you actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we were like really friends actually, because I played Barry got me to play a couple of times.
Yeah. Because that was the game everybody played before LoL really took off, or at least that was
I
the
know
game
I was the LOL person because I wanted to play League, and I think I actually Barry and I swapped. It was like play some League with me and I'll play some Han with you, and we were like he was
yeah.
like okay. Uh
Because Han was before Dota 2, and it was like Han was like a straight, not a straight copy of Dota, but like a much more direct copy of Dota. And then Dota 2 came out, and nobody cared about Han anymore. But
yeah.
Han was like the more hardcore game, and LoL was like the easy
It
game.
had like denying and everything like that, yeah.
So the reason I bring it up is because they put a character in, which is like Storm Panda from or Storm Seer from like from the original Dota. It's like the thing that can zoom
Mhm.
across the map. But when they put it in, they didn't have a model for it, so they used the Utah Teapot. Which are you familiar with what that is? Uh,
No.
so the Utah Teapot is it's like a graphics thing. Like some computer scientists back in like the storied age of probably like 1990 something, 1975 apparently. Like some dude like went out to a store and like bought a teapot and like modeled it, and it's like the standard. It's like a very curvy teapot, and so it's like it's a standard reference object essentially. So,
Gotcha. Yeah,
uh,
okay.
so yeah, no, it's so just a funny kind of aside. Like you see things like this happen occasionally, right? Like, a lot of games will use like I think the Blizzard standard one is like it's like a checkered box with like an exclamation point in it for like
Mm.
unfound texture stuff. I just thought that was interesting aside, but yeah, you've obviously played a lot more Valheim than I have. What do you have? What are your kind of bigger? What were kind of the bigger things that you think are exciting about it?
Some extra exciting pieces of Valheim that I think are neat are the way in which the game is paced. Because we talked about it being paced very slowly, right? Like at this point, I have put let's just take a look. I put 44 hours into the game. That's a pretty reasonable amount in a game like Assassin's Creed, right? 44 hours got me really far. I think I put a total of 60 hours in that game when I cleared a couple of zones. I've unlocked a ton of extra systems. I'm very solidly in the kind of like mid game, maybe even the late game of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But with Valheim, I do not feel that. I feel like I'm very much in the early game, right? Like we are just now exiting the Bronze Age. Just last night, we went to the swamp in a big, I would call it a war band, I guess, to be thematic. In a big war band, we all went to the swamp because we found a dungeon. We killed the second boss which gets, this is a little bit of a spoiler, and I'm sorry, which gets you a key that you can use to unlock the dungeons in the swamp, and the dungeons in the swamp have iron in them, right? We mined a bunch of iron, and everybody took away their iron and like did something different with it. I had 12 iron, and once I picked up an iron bar and I crafted iron nails, I saw that I could make a long ship for 10 iron effectively. It's like 100 iron nails. Um, and so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to build a longship, right? Like this is the, like this is the next thing that I'm going to do. And then we all piled into the longship and we went on a big expedition to go find a new sort of undiscovered piece of Black Forest because I needed tin. Like I wanted to get just as much tin as I could possibly, like find. And I think that is maybe the coolest part of Valheim, right? That it is not trivial to kind of embark on bigger adventures that are like that, and that are more substantial experience, like gameplay experiences. Like it's a lot of fun in the same way that it's kind of fun to like get a group of friends together and run Mythic Plus dungeons, right? It's fun to get a group of friends together and say, okay, we're all going to hop the portal to go down to where the swamp is. We're going to build a base just outside so that if we die we can just walk right, back to our corpses. We're going to fight our way through all the enemies in the swamp until we get to the dungeon. We're going to enter the dungeon, clear the dungeon, mine it, and then head back, right? That process is, I guess, I don't know, that process is just like very compelling. um the slowness of the game, I will say, is something that does bother me a little bit on like kind of the crafting side of thing. Like, so for instance, the smelter and the charcoal kiln are kind of frustrating for me, um just because they take forever and it's hard to build them. So, like, I like that it is hard for me to go mine copper, right? And the way most people mine copper will be 10 individual ores at a time. They'll go back to the same node 3 or 4 times, right? I'll mine 10 copper, my inventory is full, I go back to my base. Something that I do more substantial expeditions than that. I typically take a boat out to where I know copper deposits are, or I will take a cart, like I will take my cart out and then use sort of the cart as a temporary inventory space where I just keep going back to the cart, loading in all of the copper. I did this the other day and I got like 90 copper, right? But then I have to sit there for like an hour and a half just loading it into the smelter because it takes fucking forever to do that. Not to mention that I have to like farm a ton of trees to make the charcoal to keep the smelter going, all of that other kind of um all of that other kind of stuff. The thing is that this is all very colored because I've been playing on a multiplayer server. I don't have a single player game. I haven't done anything single player. It's all been on a shared persistent server. Um when you were playing it single player, did you feel like you were sort of lacking? I'm specifically interested in like the boss. Like when we first fought Eikthyr, who's the first boss, we did it as a big group, and we kind of almost had like a comp. Like I had a shield and good armor, and like people had high ranged, so they were shooting it with bows and arrows or whatever. What was your strategy in
Uh,
that sense?
Walk, roll. It was very Dark Souls-ish, actually. Not quite, but like it has similar kind of like, when you're swinging, you can't cancel out of it. So like, it's got the kind of
Mhm.
commit style stuff to it. Not as unforgiving as Dark Souls. I got it on my first try. I wonder if it scales the HP based, because like, it took me a little while to 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 knock it down, but it wasn't like unbarrel, just kind of like bonk, 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 roll, 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 bonk, 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 that kind of thing. And also, um, it didn't seem to be damaging me through my shield at all. So as long
Mhm.
as I like, I was careful. I got hit a couple of times, but I ran in there with like a piece of cooked meat, a raspberry, and a mushroom ticking away, and that was more than enough health to keep me up and running against it for a while. Like I took a handful of hits, and I came close to dying a couple times, but that was like me getting greedy and overextending for hits when going into its attack animation. Which I like again. So that was the thing. That was one of those things that really struck me is like the model for the boss was super super great looking. I thought that was like
Yeah.
really impressive to me. Right? Like
Eikthyr is super metal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, uh, but yeah, I didn't find it particularly oppressive. Like how, like I imagine if like I had like how many of you took down the boss?
5 of us, maybe?
How long did it take you?
5 minutes,
Well, but
10 minutes.
did it feel difficult at all?
Um, to be honest, not really. Not for me. I was just tanking damage. All the only thing I was doing, I was never hitting the boss. I was just getting the boss because he does that cone attack.
Right.
So as long as he was focused on me, Ben and Rachel could be sitting in the back plunking away with arrows. So I just sat there with my shield up the whole time, basically.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I feel like it would, like it should go down really. They might scale a little bit just because it feels like it should go down super fast if you're doing, or yeah, at least if it had as much health as it seemed to have when I was hitting it, right? Like, it's got a big animation for that cone attack, right? So I would just like, one, if I caught it with the shield, it didn't seem to do any damage to me, and two, if I could like pretty easily roll around it and like get a couple of thwacks on its backside while it was playing that animation. So, um, yeah, uh, it didn't seem super. It wasn't super difficult to me, which uh, I wouldn't say it's disappointing. It's the first boss. Total of like 3 or 4 hours in the game to get past it, which I didn't think was like super overbearing for what it was, right? Like how many is it logarithmic? How many hours did it take you guys to get to the second boss? Do you think?
That's interesting. We just did the second boss last night, so probably 35 hours. I would say we killed the boss the very first night, maybe after 6 hours. So that's maybe logarithmic. Part of it though is that we waited until we were very ready. We were sitting at a place where we probably could have taken the second boss without too much trouble for a couple of days, but we were just kind of waiting for everybody to be there and online together.
Sure, sure.
The server is run by my friend Mard, so we were like, are we gonna go fucking kill the Elder while Mard isn't there? I mean, Phalanor, uh, I pinged him because he was playing WoW at the time, and I was like, hey, we're gonna go do the Elder, right? Like, do you want to come with us, kind of thing? Because I don't want to leave anybody out, if that makes sense. And part of it is that we also had we got to sort of piggyback on the work of others, right? Like, so Fail and Rachel have done way more exploration than kind of the rest of us. Like, my focus has been very building focused, mining focused. Like, I have the best pickaxes and the best wood cutting of anybody on the server. Um, and but I don't do all that much exploring. My map is much smaller compared to sort of everyone else. So they were the ones that were like, okay, we're gonna go mount an expedition to go out to where the Elder is, right? Because you get the location in the dungeons. We went out to where the Elder was, and we plopped the portal down there. So I just got all I had to do to do the Elder was take the portal, right? What everybody else had to do, it took them a certain number of hours in order to actually kind of journey out that far.
Right, right. But like this is like specialization of labor stuff, right? Like, they were
Hmm.
exploring while you were like, making pickaxes, right? Because presumably they wouldn't been
Yeah.
able to make the pickaxes on their own. So that's like, you know, that's interesting. I wonder if like, so that's the thing that I think doesn't actually get captured super well in a lot of games, unless like the game like mechanically restricts you, right? Like,
Yeah.
wow, you can, like, the thing that keeps you from being both a blacksmith and a leather worker and an alchemist is the game says you can only pick two, right?
Explicit code says
Yeah,
that you cannot be a DPS and a tank at the same time.
right. Yes. Whereas this is like it seems like a kind of like you could do everything, but it would take you a while, and that's why it's viable single player wise, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the difference between like going to the store, going to the buddy store, and picking up a pickaxe, or like making your own artisanal pickaxe, with your own self mined door or whatever.
Well, so to be clear, everybody else can make pickaxes, right? It's just like, what do you put your time into, right? Like, I put my time into farming 90 copper and bringing it back to my compound and smelting it all and then
sure.
making two pickaxes that are max level, right? Like, but Rachel's pickaxe she also has a bronze pickaxe, though I don't know that it's upgraded as far as
Sure,
mine is,
sure.
that kind
I
of thing.
mean, and in the real world, everyone can make a hamburger. Some people go to McDonald's. Some people buy a
Yeah.
pre-made patty. Some people buy ground beef. Some people grind their own beef, right? Some people raise their own cows, right? Like, um, so it is. Arahe is saying it is not. I'm not sure exactly what that was in response to, but apparently,
It is not as upgraded as mine, I think. Is
okay.
the Her pickaxe is not as well upgraded as mine is. I think everybody dabbles in everything, right?
Right, right.
Like I'll do a little bit of exploring or making farm or making like a farm or whatever. But like my farming operation is much smaller than Rachel's at her. She has like an island base. Um, she has a much more advanced farm than I have and does a better food stuff than I have. In fact, when I do food stuff, I go to her house. I don't have a cauldron at my house, even though I could easily build one, but it's just like, why would I when I can just hop a portal? Um, but
Specialization of labor, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is exactly what that is. That actually is pretty natural, though. Like, obviously, Rachel and I play a lot of these kinds of games together. So for instance, in Stardew Valley, I am like the fishing person, where I basically always am doing fishing, and then in our other game, I have like picked up doing preserves, right? So it's like it is my purview to be going around all the kegs and filling them with hops to make beer or whatever, right? Whereas it's her purview to go into the barn and milk the cows for whatever, right? So that kind of specialization of labor thing is actually a neat aspect that isn't honestly that well explored. Even in like Minecraft, like there's not as many opportunities for
Well,
that. Like you can have builders, I guess, and miners and everything else, but
that's the thing though, right? Like I think it is explicitly like if it's happening in Minecraft, it's just because like that's what people kind of want to do, which
mhm.
maybe sounds a bit off, but like you don't have to like put any because everything's relatively effortless, right? Like you don't have to put the effort into specializing yourself in that way, right? Like theoretically, like I could imagine a scenario where like if you get enough people on a server in this game where like people further specialize, right? Like maybe you're just like feeding ore into the smelter whereas somebody else is going out and actually like mining it, right? Like that type of thing to
Yeah, I
keep
mean
things
that's true.
working.
Maybe the answer to my frustration at having to sit around and put things in the smelter over and over again is to find somebody to who would enjoy that.
Yeah, or or was doing something nearby and could do that right while they were
Yeah.
doing other stuff. I think that's like an interesting set of things to potentially interesting set of like motivating game mechanics, right? Because like you know one of the versions of this is how Factorio does it, which is like the game is all like how to automate all of this, right? Because you
Yeah.
can melt things manually yourself, and maybe you will to like kind of bootstrap yourself into it, but like the ideal is that like you lay down some conveyor belts, it's all doing itself, and like you throw your you put on your top hat and like smoke a cigar while industry happens around you, right? Like that's like the kind of core fantasy of that. Whereas um the core fantasy of this game seems to still be in the uh the sorry, I'm laughing because Arahe has written to force Rachel to do it in the chat. Which, yeah, but yeah, the core fantasy of this, I think, like is you try and capture that kind of like more agrarian's not the right word, but like like that kind of like hunter gatherer level to like early industrial level kind of
Yeah.
feeling, and not deal with any of the kind of automation stuff, right? Because like Minecraft is weird because it's like kind of like not targeting a particular historical or even like a historical fantasy type of deal, right? Like it has the tools that you can automate things if you want to, but it's not particularly goal oriented like Factor. Like Victoria wants you to build conveyor belts and like
Yeah,
automate
it is
everything.
impossible to I don't think you could complete Factorio. It would like if I think about the rocket, right? It would take eons if you were to sit because the core thing in Factorio is that if you craft something by hand, it takes way longer than if you do it in an assembler. So I think if you think of a rocket and you disassemble it into all of its component parts and you multiply all of those parts by the crafting time in your inventory it would take to make them, it would be decades. You know what I mean? Like even outside of like farming the material or managing any of that kind of stuff, like I think it would literally take decades to actually build a rocket and progress all the way through that system without any automation. Whereas with Minecraft, it is much easier because all you got to do is arrange and click kind of thing.
Yeah, and you can automate it if you
Also, the
want to, but
systems
it's
are
not.
insanely simple compared to like Factorio.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the systems in Minecraft have, like, but they have optional complexity, right? Like the complexity is there, but it's entirely optional, and you don't
Mhm.
need it to progress, right? Like, um,
Yeah, I also think that a lot of that complexity is like a little cheesy. Like I've never liked people do monster spawner cheeses, automated chicken
Sure.
You create the chickens, it kills the chickens, it takes the eggs, it puts the eggs in the chest, that kind of stuff. I hate that. I think that's lame,
Yeah,
and like
I
it
mean,
kind of ruins the fantasy.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like if at that point, why not just like turn on creative mode and give yourself the resources, right? Like,
Yeah. Yep.
um, which is a legitimate way to enjoy the game if that's what you want to do. But like, I mean, I think that there's like, I'm gonna call it more legitimate, quote unquote, like it doesn't involve abusing spawner mechanics, ways to in Minecraft, right? Like redstone and stuff, and like moving stuff around. But like
Hmm.
maybe it's that kind of uh uh like the what's it called, like the complexity curve, like complexity curve in Minecraft seems pretty linear, maybe even like less than linear, whereas like in Factorio it's definitely like exponential, right? Like a big part of the thing you're talking about with like it takes decades, it's just like straight parallelism, right? Like
Yeah.
you can have two assemblers working at once, whereas you can only have one of you doing anything. um yeah uh yeah so, Arahe is apparently not a fan of spawn farms either. um so fun story. I When we were in college, I don't think you were a part of this, but I hosted a Minecraft server on my computer in my apartment.
Hmm.
Um, and we were just starting it, right? Like we were kind of like dicking around. It was like the first time we had like really set it up, and so we all built this kind of like base. And I like light a tree on fire, and it almost crashes the server because like you can't handle like the whole like all these trees being on like because like it spreads throughout like the whole like forest area. And it's just like the game's just chugging along, which is super
Yeah.
hilarious to me. But yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I think that the online server aspect is a big thing in Valheim, and I would recommend that folks like if you can try and play with like a group of like a group of friends to try and create some of this like parallelism or whatever.
yeah,
I have found that people do like we all started kind of being built out of one base, and all I was doing was I was going and farming wood. I don't know why. I just like cathartically really enjoyed chopping down the trees. Um, and I was feeding all of that wood to Mart, who was building like building the base, building the house kind of thing. And everybody was doing something kind of along those lines. But over time, right, like everybody else kind of wanted to be like, okay, I'm gonna make my spot, right? I'm gonna claim this area. This area is now my area, right? And I feel like that's natural, and that's actually pretty like fun, and it does create kind of like a rudimentary economy. Um, I got some Certling cores from Fail because Fail does all this exploring and he'll do dungeons. And so the cores are what you need to make smelters. Um, and so I was just like, hey, do you have any of these? And he was like, yeah, sure, in my house. Go pick them up. That kind of thing, right? Like, I think that is like a lot of fun, and that is like cool. And also just like boy, going on a Viking longship with everybody and setting sail is really sweet.
yeah. No, that's actually I was asking. Part of why I was asking about like kind of the like how like if the time between bosses keeps growing, right? Because like I feel like you kind of have to like first of all, I think the game enforces that you have to kill. Like if I were to jump onto your server, I would have to go kill the second boss at some. So
Hmm.
um uh on my own. So like it feels like you have to like join up in like certain windows, otherwise you're kind of like not in the right space for everybody else on the server that or everybody else
Well,
has
so
to do.
interestingly, if you joined our server, you could just join our server where you're at right now, and
Right.
like we could go help you. You could take the portal, you could go kill the elder on our server. And theoretically, like, and I could give you gear or something like that.
Right, but
Um,
that we were as we were talking about that kind of defeats half the point, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right
But you
like
could also just like come onto the server. Anybody could come onto the server and sort of start fresh. I have seen some kind of like server hopping stuff that I'm not a huge fan of because um your
persistent.
inventory is persistent across servers. So there were a couple of people. I'm not gonna name names. I'm not gonna call anybody out. But like one of the things that you can do, for instance, is you're out in the middle of the boonies, right? Your axe breaks. You can drop out of that game, go into another server where you're at home, repair at a workbench, and then go back, right?
Ooh,
Which to me feels cheap, right? Like
yeah.
part of the problem of going out on expeditions like that is your stuff isn't that durable, right? You are going to have to repair it. So like, yeah, I agree. Fail in the chat saying, "Ooh, that's cheating," right? Like, part of that is like make a workbench, put a roof over it, right? Like put a little bit of work, put a little bit of effort into kind of like fixing that. I'm very hyper about the rested buff actually. So something that I do a lot is I will make temporary residences so that I can, like a bare minimum house, right? So that I can give myself a rested buff while I'm out mining because it increases your stamina regeneration by a lot or whatever. And that's like part of the fun, right? Like part of the fun is like dealing with those problems as they arrive. But I definitely do think that the exponential thing that you've talked about is real, specifically because I've seen that there is like more. One of the things that we had to do the swamp effectively was create potions of poison resistance because there's a lot of poison damage. And like if you take poison damage without a poison resistant potion, you are fucked, right? Like one instance, it is going to tick away at your health 10 HP at a time till you're fucking dead, right? But if you take the poison resistance, well, all of a sudden that's 1 HP. That's fine. Like that's whatever.
You
Easy
eat a
to handle,
berry
easy
and
to sort of
it,
do with. And creating poison resistance potions now kind of adds to the complexity of, right? Like first your adventure just needed you to have an axe, right? Well, now it's an axe but also a pickaxe, but also a weapon, but also your armor, but also like, and now you keep adding but also, right? You want better food. That food, it's no longer just, oh, I killed a deer, I cook its meat. It's, I killed a deer, I take the meat from that, I take this other thing and the third thing, and we put it all in the cauldron. And so now you're farming for 3 different items at different, complexities in order to create better whatever, right? You're farming carrots at the same time that you're foraging for mushrooms, at the same time that you're, killing bad guys to take their whatever, right? Um, so I definitely do think that that complexity is real. I'm going to be interested, and I will keep us posted in the back half about what this process looks like to get to the third and the fourth bosses in like the game, right? Like I don't know how many bosses, maybe 5 or 6. Doesn't seem like a ton. But we have just learned the location of the third boss, and it is very far away. So we'll see.
yeah, I believe it's 5 bosses currently and of a planned 9. Uh,
Okay.
uh, yeah. Um, that's interesting. Yeah. The point being that like because so much of this is about exploration, about discovery, right? Like jumping in ahead of where you are feels like robbing yourself of the fundamental experience of what you
Yeah.
want in this game, right? So like but it is that I think it's actually a smart design choice, right? Like if you
Mm.
keep growing these gaps to give somebody a chance to catch up if they want to do that, right? If they want to like catch up on their own and move in and not have like not feel like they've lost out too much.
Yeah, I
Um,
also don't mind a minor amount of catch up. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like, if I'm sitting on a lot of troll hide right now, just because I've killed a number of trolls at this point. So one of the things where people who joined the server a little bit late, we just gave them troll hide armor or whatever. But it's not like, you know, they don't get the fun of killing their first troll. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
Like they still get to experience like that and have fun doing that kind of thing. So like I do think that there are good ways to do it and like bad ways to do it, right? If I'm bringing a bunch of iron to a server that hasn't killed the first boss, that kind of feels shitty to me, but giving hand me down armor that's just sitting in a chest somewhere to somebody, that seems pretty fair.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think the big markers, like at least the natural ones, are like your boss progress, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, and I don't think that that's like too hard to do, right? Like I think going up to the first boss was very super easy for me to do. I don't know how far I'm off from the second boss, but it sounds like I'm quite a ways off, right? Like since I just killed the
Have
first
you
one.
have you done a dungeon yet?
I don't think I've seen one. Um,
Okay, yeah, so because you've only been doing meadows, I'm sure, right? As a
so
biome.
I stumbled into the Black Forest right before I killed the first.
Okay, the Black Forest is kind of level 2, I guess, in a
Right.
way. And that's when this stuff opens up. Copper, tin, uh, dungeons. Core wood is also another thing. It's a different type of wood that is useful for building stuff. It's more, it's like log cabin. Comes from pine trees or whatever, right? Like our first buildings were much more rickety because we were just using natural wood. But then we unlocked core wood, and so like my compound has a core wood skeleton, which makes it more secure. And I have a second floor with a whole bunch of like all this extra shit. And so like there's that kind of stuff.
Okay. And can you explain to me how like this kind of invasion mechanic works? Because I basically saw like things are attacking, and the crow told me things will attack you occasionally. So I have no idea how that goes.
Yeah, it just procs randomly, and it seems to scale with your boss progress. So when it's actually interesting that you killed Eikthyr and then got a Grey Dwarf invasion. The first ones that we were getting all the time were Grey Dwarf invasions. Then for a while we were getting, like I said, the troll, right? You'd hear like, oh, the ground shakes around you or whatever. That was when the troll showed up at the house and smacked a wall in half, basically. And that was because we had defeated the first boss, and trolls are in the Blackwoods and like a feature of the second, like kind of the Bronze era, right? Is trolls. Then most recently, because we defeated the Elder, and then last night we had like a foul stench is in the air or whatever. Because the third area seems to be swamp. That's where like these iron deposits are and everything. And in the swamp, um, we fight Draugr, who are like zombies,
Right.
kind of like the Skyrim Draugr, for instance. And so that invasion is a bunch of Draugr and skeletons and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure it scales off of your boss progress.
Okay. And uh, how does resting work in multiplayer? Does it at all? Like, can everybody go to bed at
Mhm.
the same time?
Yeah,
Or
it's like in Minecraft. If everyone is in bed, it will skip to the next day.
okay. And what like will it like pull you out of bed if like there's an invasion at night? Like everybody goes,
No, I have never actually been invaded at night. Like if it's gonna pass the day, it just passes the day, as far as I
huh,
understand.
interesting. Interesting. So my only invasion I've dealt with was at night, and it was raining, so I couldn't go to sleep because my fire went out, and I can't put the fire inside your house, right? Or else you like suffocate or something. I had heard
You
that.
can, but that's a building challenge. I have fires in my house, but I have chimneys to funnel the folks smoke out, basically.
Okay, huh, interesting. I don't
Yeah.
like. Is that like do you have like access to a thing that is a chimney, or are you like building them out of like
I
walls?
I am building chimneys out of like wood panels. So my compound is a big U, right? And the U doors are an entrance, and then there's an outdoor, which is where my forge, my workshop, my cart, all that stuff is, right? Um, in the back piece, I have a fire on each end, and then two fires in the middle with cooking things on them, right? And then I have wood paneling around those that funnels into the roof. And then in the roof, I just have like a small raised portion. Like most of the roof is just normal, but then there's like a little hole basically, so this the smoke can get out, right? And so like you know, that was all designed as part of the thing. Actually, the thing with the fires was specifically so that I could get a good rested buff. Because like I said, I'm pretty hyper about it. And so I'd initially only wanted to have fires on the corners, like the back corners of the compound, but I realized I also had to have one in the middle as well in order to make the whole thing a rested area.
Interesting.
Also, and this might be one of my we didn't talk about this, but this is another one of my favorite things. The quality of your rest scales with your comfort, which includes stuff like, like benches and like rugs and shit and like banners or whatever. So like there's actually a pretty good mechanical reason to like decorate your house. Not that I have decorated the compound at all. But if I want a better quality rested buff that lasts for 15 minutes instead of like 10, I have a good reason to like put the time into decorating it.
That is very cool. You know, I did notice I threw a deerskin rug down in my like little hovel, which I built
Mhm.
in like the scout. Like I found like a half built thing, and I was like, I will finish this. This will be my first house. And so I did that. I threw a rug down. I was like, oh boy, the buff lasts for 12 minutes instead of 10. I'm special. You know,
Yeah, yeah, that is exactly what that's like. Yeah,
um, I think it's actually fairly well telegraphed too. Like they call it comfort level, and it's like a number, and it makes sense, and like you can see it go up. So I think that's actually
yeah,
a well telegraphed mechanic. I think it's really well done. Um, but
I agree.
But yeah, we're closing in towards the end of this hour. Do you have other stuff you want to talk about this game? Because I'm kind of out of what I've done with the game.
No, I am good. It comes very highly recommended. I still don't know why it has gripped me in quite this way, though. I think we've talked a lot about stuff, so maybe there's some insight in there. Um, but if you're listening to this and you're on the fence, give it a shot.
All right. Well, with that, how was your week?
My week was pretty good. I watched some stuff. We also played a lot of, like I played a lot of WoW. Are you surprised? Are you surprised that I played like actually maybe this might be one of the weeks I've played the most amount of World of Warcraft, which is weird. Just in terms of like raw mythics done because I did 4 right off the bat basically. 4 14s. And then which is great because it's like the highest level for the chest reward was what I'm looking for. And then I did a couple of like 10s and 11s to sort of like help people out. And a 12 I think was also in there. And then I was like, "Ew, I have all these gross 10s and 11s in my chest. I need to push them off." So I ran a bunch more 12s and 13s just to just to push off the bad keys so that my chest is nice and pretty on Tuesday.
Yeah.
One of these days I'll get a fucking weapon out of there.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. My chest, since I don't do anything really besides raid at this point. Like I'll drop it and do occasional things, but I just don't have
Mhm.
like I want to do other things with my time, unfortunately. But like the past like 3 weeks, I've been pulling Stygia out of my vault, which is like so
Wait,
painful.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I
'Cause then there's not even raid stuff that's upgrades for you?
so I just have gotten unlucky. Like
Fair
stuff.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and like I think 2 weeks ago I got like the pants I already had, but with speed on it included. So I was like, I guess that's an upgrade, and I took that.
Yeah, I think that's a weakness of the vault in a way, because with Mythic Plus, I am basically guaranteed, right? Like, I basically don't get at the level that I'm at right now, I don't get upgrades out of the dungeons themselves. All of my upgrades come out of the vault, right? But from raid, because the dungeons themselves have a depressed item level because they're infinitely spammable. You can't have super high item level stuff in Mythic Plus, or else people just run Mythic Plus to gear. That's it, right? Um, but the vault has an inflated item level so that running Mythic Plus gets you something like a real solid reward every single week, right? So I'm pulling these like 226 pieces of gear out for these 14s, for instance. But in raid everything's flat, right? You get 13 gear out of the raid, you get 213 gear out of the vault, which sort of means that I think it's much more likely that if you're like a raid only player that your vault is just Stygia for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, like I don't feel too bad because I haven't been putting the like a ton of effort in. Um,
Hmm.
so this is a thing that I think maybe I don't like about the kind of like static loot changes is that um, it's not the end of the world, but like there is going to be a time when I'm not going to have like all of the gear that I could use, but I'm not gonna like the gear that I have is going to be the best I can get out of raid. So if I want to upgrade something, I'll have to go do something. I don't think that's the end of the world, but like if you wanted to just be a raider, it feels like you can't be. If you want to be like if you want to be, I don't know, like a high tier player, if that makes sense, right? And maybe I'm not super interested in doing that, but like that seems like a weakness to me. What do you think?
I guess I get that in the sense of like, well, I mean, to be honest, I don't have a lot of upgrades out of raid either. Now that I think about it, for bosses we've downed, I guess. Which part of this is that like over time, I'm going to get more 226 gear. At this point, I am a high end mythic player more than I am a high end raid player. Um, so most of my gear is going to be coming from mythics and also geared towards mythics. And so I will kind of outscale and not be finding upgrades in the raid anymore.
So, 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 so,
Uh,
so what I mean by this is like, you know, there's a great ring that I actually have the 213 ring from the broker fight, which I can't remember the archivist maybe archive
Artificer.
yeah, artificer, right? Like
Mhm.
that ring has like good stats for me, right? And I have one of those, and it's unique equipped, so whatever. But like you or maybe this is a bad example, but like I think I've got like a pair of pants that aren't quite stat on, but I don't know if there's a
Oh,
pair.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is actually a problem that I have had, and because like there aren't good rings for me in Nathria.
right.
Most of the rings are like I'm looking for crit haste, and with heavy crit, you say crit over haste, right? More crit than haste. Um, and there isn't one of those in Nat 3, just because there's so much less loot compared to the vast variety of dungeons. So it is better for me to get a ring out of mythics. Like my best in slot includes a mythic ring because there is a crit over haste ring that drops in a dungeon that I could theoretically get out of the vault at 226, right? And that would be like a best in slot ring for me. But I have to say that it is actually frustrating because weapons don't drop like in that same way. Something that was true in Battle for Azeroth was there was a wide variety of weapons, and if you actually wanted like the best like weapon that you could get with your stats or whatever, there was one weapon called Geti that had a proc that was better than any stats or whatever, but like discounting that, I would have to I could get that out of a mythic, and so you had much better ability to target your gear and the kinds of stat waste you had on it. You also had stuff like, one of the reasons that I was farming horrific visions in Battle for Azeroth was because that gear was randomized, so I had the ability to proc crit haste bracers, even if there are no other crit haste bracers in the game. There isn't an ability to do that anymore, which does actually really suck, and I think kind of holds the system back. I'm a little surprised, to be honest, that they didn't, that they don't have more complex or complete item tables between PvP mythics and raiding, just because like they're all kind of close. And the thing that I fear actually, one of the things about Mythic Plus is that the dungeons only have two kinds of strength weapons. They have crit over mastery and haste over verse, right? So there is no ability for me to get a crit over haste weapon in any of these dungeons. Even though there are four different weapons I can pick up, two of them have the same, like there are two sets that each have the same stat array with like minor differences. There's a little more haste in one, a little more verse in the other, kind of thing. And even in the raid, there's only two weapons in the raid. One of them is verse over haste, the other one is mastery over crit, which are both bad or worse for me. Not bad, obviously. Um, but I think that that's just kind of like you gotta eat what's in front of you in a way.
Yeah, eat your
I
Vegetables or whatever.
agonized. Yeah, like I agonized about this decision in the vault a couple of days ago because I had a socketed 200 helm that was crit haste. And I was like, I love this helm, but it is my lowest item level piece. And in my chest, I got a 223 verse over mastery helm, which is literally garbage, like bottom of the barrel stats. But it's just like at a 23 item level upgrade, obviously that thing is going to be an upgrade. And you're like, I should take it, but I don't want to, like I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to take it, right? Um, but those are the I guess I would say those are sort of like the compromises that you make in these sorts of games, because like I kind of empathize with the designers who have to implement these systems because they are trying to make a game that is going to be compelling for months on end, right? Like we are entering month 4 of Shadowlands, and if I am gear complete here, I have no reason to fucking play the game. So having good reasons for me to be logging in, completing my mythics, doing this and that, um, it does motivate me to play in a way that I wouldn't necessarily be motivated to play under like different kind of loot circumstances.
Yeah, but the flip side of that coin is that like if there's nothing for you to get, right? Like if the thing you want to get you can't get, like if there isn't the right item for you to get, then that also stops you from playing, right? Like at least
Yeah,
with at least with like you know the hated Titan forging, there's a reason to do everything because you might like roll lucky or whatever.
yeah.
Um,
I sort of think that the way to handle this, to be honest, might just be to randomize stats a little bit more. Like if something drops in a raid, but it might have crit haste, it might have haste first, it might have whatever. Um, I think that would be fair. And we've also talked about this. I kind of wish that the vault had an ability to lock in certain stats,
right.
because like the PvP vault always has verse, which means that if you are a PvE player and verse is your best stat, the best thing that you can do to get gear is to do high end PvP. Um, but I don't know. There's also a certain question about like how do vendors play it. Like we obviously had a whole podcast about this, but like the prevalence of vendor gear in PvP is sort of like an interesting kind of conundrum. Um, that like makes it the best way to get gear because it's so targeted compared to the other things where you're relying on random drops. I mean, like, have we talked about the Valor changes yet?
I don't know.
Did you know that they announced changes? There's a patch on the PTR 9.0.5 that includes Valor points, which is sort of what we talked about the other day. It's kind of half and half of what we talked about the other day. Wow, do you fucking hear that outside? I don't know
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what's
hear
going
a
on
little
out there.
bit. Oh, is it like
Yeah,
a siren?
it is. I think it's just a guy in a truck because there's a guy in a truck called Sheriff Drummond who has a drum set and a
Oh,
microphone in a pickup truck. Have I
he
talked about him before?
well, he appeared on the podcast once.
Oh, you're right. He did. I think this is Sheriff Drummond. Is
Okay,
who we're listening to.
okay, because I can't hear it super clear, but when he showed up last time, like however, I think it was at least a year ago at this point, it was clear enough that I could boost it, and so it was present in the middle of the.
Maybe it'll be better on the recording than it will be
Yeah,
live.
maybe.
But anyway, so there's patch 9.0.5. They've announced Valor changes, and what they're doing is they're adding a currency that comes out of both callings and Mythic Plus dungeons, right? And what that currency represents is, and it's like capped. You can only get a certain amount of it per week, which I hate. Um, and you can use it to upgrade items, right? So the way it works is if I run a dungeon, I get a ring. That ring might be item level. Like I said, right now I'm pulling item level 203, 207 gear, right? Pretty beneath me. I'm not going to get many upgrades out of this. But let's say I pick a ring with great stats, but it's at 203. It's like, okay, well, obviously my 223 ring is better, but I can maybe upgrade this ring into something that's good, right? And so the game tracks when you have done what's called Keystone Explorer, which is all of the dungeons at rank 5 timed, Keystone Conqueror, which is all of the dungeons at 10 timed, and then Keystone Master, which we talked about, all of the dungeons at 15 timed, and they unlock um, levels that you can upgrade the item to. So if you have completed, like I'm at Keystone Conqueror, I can make 213 gear. So if I get that 203 ring, I can then upgrade it twice. And it's now a pretty competitive piece of gear for me. It's not best in slot. Something that's going to come out of my vault is going to be better, generally speaking. But if I have a hole in my gear, I can fill that by running a certain amount of Mythic Plus and like putting the currency to work, kind of
I
thing.
think it's
Um,
almost exactly what we described, which we're very smart. Then I'm gonna
It
say
is
that they
pretty
listen to
close to,
our
yeah.
they
Do
listen to
they
us.
listen to our cast?
Obviously.
Listen, I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty sure a couple of the WoW devs follow me on Twitter. Not that I think any of them ever pay attention to me or this cast. um, the uh, that is pretty close to what we described. I don't love the weekly cap, uh, because like I said before, I feel like the weekly. What I liked was the Echoes of Ny'alotha system where it was not weekly capped, but just like you got big chunks of it for doing certain kinds of activities, and then it was very diminishing returns. So if I was running 25 mythics in a week, I was getting a return from every single one of those mythics, but like I wasn't, I wasn't like trying to fill my cap at all, right? Whereas this is going to kind of make me want to do. I don't know. It's just going to make me want to fill the cap. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out in kind of in actuality. But I do think that it is going to be a good way to kind of like target upgrades in those sorts of like in those sorts of lines. Players are going to be like, well, now I need to get like higher level mythics completed, and and that's going to allow me to boost this thing up to an item level that it will become, it'll become a core piece of my set. Even, like I'm pretty well geared at this moment. I think I'm the highest level person that's geared in the raid. um but even I have a couple of holes in my gear that I would love to be able to fill with this kind of a system.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Is there anything you can do with the legendary crafting map besides craft legendaries?
No, I think it's just
Okay.
craft legendaries. What do you
Interesting.
mean?
Thing
Like
is stuff
Alethium?
the thing you get from running Torghast.
Oh, so yeah, Soul Ash. Yep, yeah,
Yeah.
just legendaries. Are
Okay.
you still running Torghast, or are you done with
Well, I
that?
mean, I've been running it because I can't like it. Torghast is we've discussed this before, but it's a little bit underwhelming for me personally. Like maybe I should do like the endless halls because that's like at least a
Hmm.
challenge. Like with the um with the ring, the touch of death ring, doing a touch of death build in Torghast is like near trivial. Um,
Hmm.
because like in order to get like instant touch of death, you need like either so touch of death, like monks get a touch of death anima power, which would do like reduces it by 36 seconds, and normally that's like 6 of them to get it to 0 cooldown. Um, with the Touch of Death ring, it's 2.
You just need 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or 1, and there's also another. There is another power that's reduced the cooldowns of everything by 30 seconds to a minimum of 30 seconds, but that'll stack perfectly with the specific Touch of Death cooldown. So like one of those in the Touch of Death, and I've got instant Touch of Death. There's so many like kind of like, and at that point just stack health, and get your health.
Do you feel the water finds a crack way to, like, is that the way that you want to play it, or do you mix it up just for fun?
So it depends. I don't find any of the other like kind of builds like you go for like super compelling. So I end up
Okay.
usually just doing the touch of death build. Um, it's the thing that's always like it's I find it what's it called, enjoyable for at least a little bit of it, but like it always like the thing that is dangerous about it is that it's very possible to get to the final fight and like not have enough resources to be able to like knock down the boss enough to get the touch of death off. It's not
Sure.
because in theory it works for everything, but in practice it's a little bit more of like a clear trash build than it is a end boss build. Like you said, mostly you're building towards the end boss, which is actually
Yeah.
the having to only take 2 to get like infinite touch of death means that I've got the room in the build to kind of build other things out.
Yeah, that's pretty common for me. There's an execute one where like you cast execute a certain number of times, it increases the execute damage. And it is, at first I was like, this is just broken. This power is super fucking broken and gross. And all I need to do is take this power, the entire run is over, basically. But what I've actually found in practice is that that is a good power for the final boss because it's a single target. But like in a big group, it actually takes a while to like execute each individual target down, right? Um, and so it sort of demands me to then take trash clearing powers. I used to think that it was like one and done, right? Like all I need to do is take Voracious Culling Blade, my run is fucking over, easy, right? But now I've sort of realized that that I need to pair that with AoE powers of some variety because I'm just gonna have to be whirlwinding a lot to clear like lots of these little guys. And also just like, you like, I don't want to spend 80 years. I think technically speaking, if I want to pull one guy at a time, I can make that work with Voracious Culling Blade. But at this point, I kind of outgear Torghast so much that like I pull whole rooms pretty liberally. Though I do have like a couple of builds. I sort of have a like if I want to do a cooldown build that extends the duration of my cooldowns by a lot, that's a pretty easy build to go into. There's one that's Mortal Strike. My favorite build is called the Chop Chop build because it makes your Mortal Strike cast Whirlwind. So that actually out DPSs the execute power in like the twisting corridor, but it takes a ton of and like you need to get like 10 powers rather than just one in order to set it
Yeah.
up, sort of thing. So like there's a couple of different options, and then also on my warlock who I have done Torghast with, like he has a couple of different builds where I can either go like big tyrants where I'm like constantly spawning demonic tyrants to keep all of my like demons up or whatever. I can go like mega imps, which is just like farming tons and tons of imps or whatever. But I do feel that like there is not as much variety in Torghast for like kind of quote unquote a roguelike mode compared to any real
Yeah.
roguelike has in terms of sort of viable builds.
Yeah. Also, I found the chorus week to be kind of a letdown. I mean, maybe that's because I solo them and like
Yeah, that was a super fun week to do with people.
I
I
can
did that with a
imagine.
couple of people, and everybody rolling up into your like murder train was pretty sweet.
Yeah. No. Like it felt like a vehicle segment without enough power to like vehicle segments are kind of fun because like you just kind of like roll face over whatever you're doing. It's like
Mm,
like a 30-second diversion from your normal thing.
yeah.
Um, But when I was trying to do it by myself, I was like, this is bullshit. Like I got through one floor and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I turned around and exited and went back in and did Touch of Death. Um, but yeah.
Do you foresee yourself like how upgraded are your legendaries right now?
So my ring and my PVE stuff, my raid gear and my world gear are at the second highest. Um,
Okay.
so at some point I'll push that up, but and then I have a PvP shoulder piece that I would theoretically use, but like I don't care enough about PvP right now to actually do it, so I don't bother.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that. I think that's actually pretty natural. It seems like a lot of people have followed. I've been doing Torghast every week, but like part of it is I want to be ready for a moment where other legendaries are good, and part of it is that like I'm getting a little my core build is a little stale. I swapped to a different talent in Mythic Plus that does about the same amount of overall damage, but it's different. It's a little spikier. Because I have access to Bladestorm rather than Ravager, and Bladestorm is like a really heavy AoE cooldown sort of thing. Um, and just doing that has sort of made me want to kind of like do more Torghast to diversify my builds a little bit more compared to just like having this one legendary that I use like for all purposes. Um, like I think I don't think that the game is like perfectly balanced, but I think that it's functionally balanced, and I'm pretty sure I could take a different legendary into like raid and still be like doing well. Also, a bunch of legendaries are getting buffed on the PTR, which I'm happy about. So there's probably going to be a new best in slot in like 3 weeks or something like that. But I've mostly just been farming for that kind of like eventuality.
Yeah.
Um,
So the thing is like the limiting factor for me is like just gold to buy the like the piece of leather,
oh sure, yeah,
which is a tough part, but
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. The leather ones are brutal. Those they are so much money because they have the most kind of stringent. The cloth ones are cheap as fuck because I guess it's just everybody has cloth. I have no idea. They're just insanely cheap. And I make a decent living on the blacksmithing one. It's not crazy, but those leather legendaries, I am just like, boy, those things are expensive.
well, that's that's the way it goes, I guess. Um, Something I wanted to ask you about that's not related to WoW is
Sure.
did you want to give a eulogy for Anthem?
Oh my god, Anthem. My lost love who I could go play right now, but I just don't want to. Yeah, Anthem is dead. And I am like legitimately sad about that cuz I really liked I don't know what I would call that. I like the bones of that system. I put a ton of hours into Anthem when it was first out. I put like 50, 100 hours in. Um and I reached a reasonable end game, and I was like, "Oh, I'll pick this up later when they add like more stuff." And then I never did.
And they haven't added
Uh,
new stuff, so there's that.
did see? That's the thing is I didn't even pay attention to it because one of the things about games like this is that I pretty quickly pick up the subreddit, right? But the Anthem subreddit was so toxic with like people who just fucking hate the game and they're complaining about it constantly that I pretty quickly unsubscribed, which also drove me away from the primary source of news where I would be like learning about what is coming to Anthem and
Right,
then playing it. You know what I mean?
right.
So in a certain sense, like I'm kind of the player that wanted to be activated for that game, but that couldn't be activated because of just like how quickly it turned into sort of this like I don't know cesspool of
No,
toxicity.
I, I, I felt very similarly. Like I was actually kind of excited for the game in theory, but I didn't connect with it like the way that you did. I kind of like the
Hmm.
whole felt there more for me. Um, and I was hopeful that Anthem next would be good, but I didn't have a lot of faith that it was ever gonna come through, just because like that seemed to be the way it was going.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I haven't played it yet, but the Outriders demo is out, and that doesn't have the flying stuff that Anthem does, but it's similar kind of like looter shooter stuff. So I might give that a look see at some
Yeah,
point.
it's funny. I watched a YouTuber. Do you know Bife? My name is Bife or
Yeah,
whatever, the
yeah,
Destiny
the
lore
Destiny guy,
YouTuber.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or
he talked about
Stadia
Anthem.
Astra or something
Yeah,
like that.
he talked about Anthem because he really liked the game and he wanted to like support the game on his YouTube channel, but his audience was like, no, don't. We,
Yeah,
we hate this
I'm.
game. So,
He's also a big lore guy, right? And like,
mhm.
there's some there, but like if you're not getting content updates, you're not definitely not getting lore updates, right? Like, and there, I think we did some updates, but like, it was just kind of a
Yeah, I mean,
mess. But
I loved the lore in that game. I was really hooked. I think this animated me quite a lot. Was just the story of it with the because you spend the first half of the to spoil this for everybody. You spend like the first half of the campaign Like it's you and your buddy and you're hanging out and you're trying to get this super cool suit of armor. And I was like, all right, this is a little lame. But then the plot twist is you open up the suit of armor and your like best friend paralyzes you in your armor so that he can go take it. And he steals it from you. But he doesn't steal it to become like the bad guy or anything. And I was like immediately like, oh, that's that is so cool. That one moment like completely sold me on like this story and like got me into into what was going on. But I don't know. I guess that's forever gonna remain unresolved. Big rip.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it's what was it? Someone said Anthem sang its last note, right? Because it's
Yeah.
a song. Um,
I mean, there the one silver lining that I do enjoy about this is that they announced that Dragon Age 4 is going away from multiplayer. It initially had like a multiplayer thing, and I was just like, "What the fuck?" Because the Dragon Age 3 multiplayer also sucked. And this comes from somebody I loved the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer mode, right? Like they had that horde shooter. I played so much of that. And then they basically added that to Dragon Age, but it was just I don't know. The mechanics of Dragon Age just are different
well,
from Mass Effect in a material way that kept me at bay.
gas, right? Like everybody wants to like make the next kind of like money churning pot. Everybody wants to make the next WoW, right? Like,
Yeah.
and WoW's not even like the worst of them, right? Like because like WoW, I will not say that I am completely satisfied with the way that WoW has handled its monetization, but it's pretty good all things considered, right? Like it's like mostly just your $15 subscription fee. But like like the endless microtransactions for everything fucking else is just like nonsense.
I mean, it's funny. People really get on WoW's case for the microtransactions, and in a certain sense, I agree with them. Like I think I in principle disagree with them, but in practice I kind of agree with them because I don't think that the microtransactions in WoW are all that harmful. I think they're pretty normal, right? It is only cosmetic stuff. It's very rare, you know. If you already have a 6 month sub, you like when they add a mount to the store, they give it to you for free. That kind of stuff. That's nice. That is very generous, I think, in like the microtransaction world. But I also don't want to like praise that in a way because it almost feels like being permissive towards it going down a
Yeah. So
path of grossness,
I
right?
yeah, I will agree. Like I think it is bad, but it is less bad than almost everything else out there, right? Like
Yeah.
the big part of it, I think the big part of it that makes it like much more forgivable is that there are lots of good options you can get in game by just playing it, right? Like yes, I
Hmm.
won't get like this Lunar New Year bull mount, right? But like I have a frog mount that I got from the new expansion, right? Like Black Desert was kind of notorious for this, which is like all the stuff you get in game looks fucking terrible, and you just if you want to look good, if you want to have good mog, you have to go like buy something an outfit from the
Yeah,
castle.
or like the Mog station on Final Fantasy 14 or whatever. People complain about that all the time. Like the coolest mounts, like are mounts that you get out of the shop. Um, and they just sell a lot of small pieces in the shop that it's like I wish I could. 'Cause part of this also is that wow, you can get it with gold, technically speaking, right? Like
Yeah,
there was a while where I bought all of the store mounts because I was just sitting on 3 million gold and I was like, what the fuck do I do with this, right? And you buy tokens or you sell tokens, I guess, and you call it a day, right? Um, I like that. I think goes a long way towards making it more acceptable.
yeah. And I like Final Fantasy 14. I will agree with you, it's worth, but it also wasn't terrible. Right? Like
Yeah.
it still had a lot of stuff available in game for you to get. But I'll agree. Like I think you see shades of this when people are mad that like you could only get that like explorer's backpack for a while.
Hmm.
Notice this expansion, like every faction has a backpack that you can get. Um, like
Yeah, so Failure in the chat says I wouldn't say they're the coolest mounts. One of the coolest mounts I own in FF14 was from a holiday event. I definitely do think that's true. I just mean like I part of this is that like I was tuned into these controversies in a different sort of way. But like I remember that like the fucking fat chocobo or something came. Maybe that's not the right
the
mount.
fat chocobo was like a
Some
pre-order bonus because I have that from like pre-ordering an
Yeah,
expansion
it
with
was
them.
just like it was like some mount got added to the store and people flipped out about it. And at first I thought they flipped out about it in a negative way, right? Which was like I can't believe this is a fucking storm mount. But they actually did it in the opposite way. Like, I kind of can't wait to spend my money on this, if that makes sense. They didn't quite say it in those terms, but like they were so excited for this mount, and they wanted like the mount super bad. And I was like, this is the reason that these microtransactions exist. Like they put a mount on the store that people really, really wanted, and I'm sure that they got, a million bucks off of getting, however much of their player base to pay $20 for it, right?
Yeah, no, and that's part of the thing for me, right? Like, is like, you know, how much, it's like the thing for me is like, like if I see somebody with like a paid bound out in the world, it's like, well, you paid for that, right? You didn't go and earn that, right? So it's not like the badge of honor that it once was, but like
Oh yeah.
at the same time, how much does that matter anymore, right? Like,
Oh, I think that matters a lot. I mean, I part of this is that it is my current motivation, right? Keystone Master gives you a mount, and it is only a mount that you can get if you get Keystone Master in this season, right? And it's like there's I don't even know how to explain it. There's just something about that, right? Like it is exclusive, it is for completing very high level content, right? And it is time locked, right? So you can only get it for a certain amount of time. Like I had this for 8.3, right? Like I went really hard in 8.3 to get Keystone Master, and I have that worm, and that is like a just big badge of honor compared to,
right, but
you know.
it's a badge of honor for you, and like, maybe other hardcore players will look at you and be like, "Ha, that's very impressive, there, Baron. You were the only person I know with the special worm mount, right?" But like, to the average player, do you think it matters as much? Because like I just think about like I remember back in vanilla, right? Like, when I was playing a priest, right? Like whenever people had like anathema benediction, right? Like that was kind of like, like the person who had put their time in, right, and gotten like that
Mhm.
very cool staff. Um, and I just don't feel like there's a lot of that anymore. Just because like nothing's that hard to get anymore in like kind of the abstract sense, and like all the older stuff you can kind of go back and get relatively easily. If that makes
See, I
sense.
disagree. I would
Okay.
say that Keystone Master is that. Like
Okay.
getting that mount, having that Deathwalker mount is the modern version of that. And I
Okay.
probably prefer it to an item because like it is cosmetic overall, and I think I would rather have that kind of thing than have it be, like a power thing. I mean, I do agree. Fail in the chat says there's validity to it, but you can also get carried into KSM. That is technically true, right? Like if I wanted to blow, I actually probably could buy KSM carries right now with the amount of gold I have on my character or whatever. Um, but like at the end of the day, when I see somebody with the Keystone Master mount, I typically expect them to not have bought, like to not have bought their way into it by buying into, like carry groups, right? Like I don't look at that person and say this is a person who doesn't have it and doesn't deserve it. This is a person who does, just as like a default, you know, at a glance kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and Fail is pointing out that you used to be able to remember names, weapons, and armor, and that he can't tell you the names of any of his gear right now. I totally agree, Fail. Right, like I said, Benediction Anathema was a weapon I never had, and I remember that weapon. I don't know the names of anything I have now. Right, like,
Yeah, I really miss. You know what I miss is people know trinkets because everybody talks about trinkets, right? I could rattle off a couple of trinkets.
right,
We
because
would
they're
all be like, "Oh
unique.
yeah, like they're unique and they have really game altering effects." But it's like a pair of fucking pants that gives me crit haste. Who cares? Like and that stuff is powerful, and I appreciate that it has like power. But like, there's a reason that I can quote Getty Iku to you, and I know Phelan Chat knows what Getty Iku is. He's the one that told me what Getty Iku is, right? Because it's the sword with a special effect that only it has, right? So I definitely do miss that. I definitely do miss that kind of thing about gear
Yeah,
itself.
and
Um,
part of the trinkets don't have any model to them, right? So like you don't even get to like
yeah.
see them, because like this is a thing that the Destiny people talk about, right? They want you to remember the time that you got the exotic, and I think they
Hmm.
failed largely at that because like the exotics are there's too few of them. They're too kind of like directly easy to get. Like it doesn't feel like moments where you get them. And the ones that random drop out of the raids are just kind of like, and then I ran it for the 70th time and it finally fucking dropped, thank God, right? Like, so, um, but it's an interesting thing to kind of target, right? Like, I think like games like Diablo and Path of Exile were better at it, but I think they're also like less concerned about being absolutely balanced, which I think gives them a little bit more freedom to like experiment. Um,
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like the Mage Tower, for instance, people always talk about the Mage Tower. and I did the mage tower on like a bunch of alts or whatever. But like by the end of the game, the the mage tower had become doable in a way that was like kind of accessible to like casual players. I don't think everybody could do the mage tower, and I do think you had to like express a certain amount of skill to it, right? But if I were to tell somebody as like a mark of pride or honor that I did the mage tower on this character, right? And I have the mage tower appearance for that, like for that artifact weapon. I actually do think that people look at that with a little bit of side eye just because of the way that it progressed over the course of, like over the course of the expansion. Like it was not really an expression of skill in the same way that other stuff,
Yeah, no,
like would be.
I got the mage tower appearance for my rogue, which I had not played a lot of. Like I really wanted the appearance, but like it wasn't that hard
Mm.
to like get myself to a point where I could do it. But yeah, no. Fail points out that Final Fantasy 14 almost everything has appearances. I have heard, and I don't play Final Fantasy 14, but I've heard through the grapevine that they actually are in the next expansion stripping out the one piece. I think it's belts that don't have a model, like they just
Wow.
won't exist anymore.
A Final Fantasy game, belts don't have a model?
Yeah, I think yeah, no, that's a good point.
Well, if you're gonna have 3 or 4 of them on your character,
Yeah, yeah,
you can't bog it down, right?
yeah. It's part of the it's part of the chest or whatever.
Fair
Uh,
enough, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I think of transmog in a different category. Um, I don't know. Like I guess I would like to see. The one thing I am really disappointed with in Shadowlands when it comes to like visuals is that the dungeon gear looks really terrible, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to farm it for the whole fucking expansion. Like this has always bothered me. In Raid, you get that cool Castle Nathria set, right? And then PvP uses recolors of that set, right? So if you're a high level PvP player, you can get like the mythic Nathria set, but like it's like the gladiator set. If you're a high level raider, you get that set also. That's kind of like a mark of honor, right? But there isn't such a thing for PV or for mythics in the same way. If I pull out a piece of 226 year from my vault, it has the same fucking appearance as a piece that comes out of a normal dungeon, which I just like. I hate that. I loathe that.
so how would you have it change it like recolors over a certain thing or like
Yeah, my thing. I think the thing that I would do is if you're completing dungeons over a certain thing, maybe you get like I would do maybe 2 sets, right? If you get gear out of something from a 10 or higher, you get something that is like a recolor of the base Castle Nathri appearance, and then if you pull something out of your vault, I think that that should have like a mythic appearance from like 10 or higher or whatever, right? Um, because I don't know, it feels fucking terrible to pull shit out of my vault that has the same appearance as like a normal dungeon. Part of it is really exacerbated because the dungeon sucks. The dungeon set sucks so bad in Shadowlands. In BFA, I actually liked those dungeon sets quite a lot. Because first of all, there were 2 of them. There was like the cool Tyrian dungeons and the Zandalar dungeons, so you could simultaneously get like cool Tyrian themed gear or Zandalari themed gear, which seemed very appropriate. Um, and the gear itself just was like cool and like looked good, I guess I would say, in a way that you know felt more like a raid set than it does like a leveling set, right? um but the the Shadowlands dungeon gear just I think aesthetically looks bad, and it is completely shared. All of the dungeons have the exact, like if you get a pair of plate shoulders out of any of the dungeons, they all have the exact same appearance, right? They might be recolors of one another, but like fundamentally they are that appearance, and it's the appearance on like the whatever the Watchers or whatever in Oribos, and I just think it looks awful. And to have that be the look that I'm going to be getting out of dungeons for the rest of the game, just like
That does kind of suck. I wish they had gone like giving it'd be cool to be able to get like things that you don't see other places in the expansion, right? Like a
mm.
troll theme thing out of the other side or something. Um, like
Yeah, exactly.
but
I mean, I also wish that weapon appearances. I'm a little disappointed with the weapon appearances just because like it's specific to the Covenant or whatever. I mean, that's fine, and it's not like the worst thing in the world. Um, but I don't know. I just there's something about the idea of like one of the changes they made in Battle for Azeroth was they got rid of class sets, right? And the raid gear looked like it came out of like the raid that you did, right? So like if you do Uldir, the weapons come out of there are very like Titan themed or whatever, which I think is cool. It makes sense, right? Like if I am doing this raid with my friends or whatever, and we're like downing these bosses, I want to be picking up the weapon of the boss and taking it with me, which is effectively what they did, right? Um, and in Shadowlands, that is not the case. Like I'm not going to get, you know, whatever Lady Darkvane's dagger. I'm going to get that little token and bring it back to my base and get the generic like Covenant dagger. I don't know. I don't love that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not so sure how much of like a fan I am of like locking everything to the Covenant. Like I think it's like a cool idea to have like that be like part of your gear out, but like having that be like your end all be all. I don't think I'm a huge fan of.
I think it won't matter in a bit. In 9.1, we're gonna get a new raid, and that raid is gonna have unique weapons.
Okay.
So this is a very temporary problem, but I think if you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have said that it's cool, but now I'm a little disappointed by it.
Plus, it's hard to get the freaking ampules or whatever the fuck they're called.
Yeah,
Like,
Jesus fucking Christ. I'm still sitting on a 207 weapon. It's funny. My very first mythic chest, I got a 207 weapon, and I was like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, I'm level 187, and all of a sudden, my highest level piece of gear is my weapon. Thank God. And I'm still using that exact same weapon, like,
I mean,
2 months later.
I honestly think that this is like, I think it's a very minor problem, but like, I think ideally I'm supposed to be using two one-handed weapons, but like I got one ampule like a month ago, and it's like I'm probably not going to get another one for a while, so I went for the staff, right? Just
I
so
think that was correct, yeah.
yeah, just and like if I get another ampule, I'll get the one-handed weapon, but I'll wait around for another one, maybe try and get another piece of thing to complement. But I think that's like a weird kind of hole in like the loot progression, right?
With like the ampules or whatever. Actually, I like that interaction in a normal sense, right? Like the interaction of I am a like let's say I'm a caster, right? This actually just happened to me on Gondor. I got a sword out of my vault from a weapon, right? And so it's like, oh well, I was using a staff, but now I need to find an offhand to use with this sword
Right.
because the sword is super high level. It's like 216 or whatever. And I like that as a gearing interaction, right? Of like, okay, let's go find a thing to complement this other sort of thing, right? Oh, I got a really good one-handed weapon out of my, out of my vault or whatever. I now need to find its complement. But with the beads, because they can go for either one-handed or two-handed weapons, that doesn't feel good
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. Especially because like you're super limited in like what you can get from when you can get them, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've talked about that for a while, and we're over time. All right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before I close this out?
Nope. I have nothing else to talk about.
All right. Well, if you'd like to tell us anything you thought about this episode about Valheim, or if you'd like to like bitch at us about WoW, we can all like kvetch together. You can also some dersplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@dersplaygames.com. You can watch this live at twitch.tv/dersplaygames. You could follow us on all the podcast places, rate and review us. That's everything I had. Buddy, do you have anything else you want to promote?
I have nothing else I am looking to promote.
Well, in that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.